My name is Clint Smith, and I'm a staff writer at The Atlantic, author of the poetry collection Counting Descent, the narrative nonfiction book How the Word is Passed, and host of the YouTube series Crash Course Black American History. I'm also a former high school English teacher at Parkdale High School in Prince George's County, Maryland, where my students and I work with LearnServe. So this incredible community has been a part of my life for almost a decade now. Part of what I love about LearnServe is it gave my students an opportunity to meet other young people from a range of different backgrounds who they might otherwise not have encountered, to see them share ideas, provide new perspectives, and wrestle with big questions alongside people who came from both similar and different communities than they did was a special reminder of how proximity, generosity, and collaboration can help foster a deeper sense of collectiveness and give us the tools to build a better world. In my own work, part of what I try to do is help people think about how history has shaped the contemporary landscape of inequality. If we want to spark change, we have to recognize that so much of the history we tell ourselves was a long time ago really wasn't that long ago at all. History shaped the present. Context matters. I think it's essential, for young people especially, to understand this, to understand the reason one community experiences poverty and another community experiences affluence is not simply because of the people in those communities, but it's also about what has been done to, given to, or taken from those communities via laws and policies over the course of generations. Understanding that gives us the tools to move forward and create a more just society. I'm honored to be here with you all tonight and honored to be recognized by this organization that does such great and important work. In my most recent book, How the Word is Passed, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America, I explore how different historical sites reckon with or fail to reckon with their own relationship to the history of slavery. And so for me, part of what that meant was exploring my own relationship to the iconography, the symbolism, the statues, the monuments, the museums that reflect this history. And a lot of what I thought about were the statues of the Confederacy that I grew up surrounded by in my hometown in New Orleans. And so while the book of How the Word is Passed is a book of narrative nonfiction, my origin story is that of a poet. And I wrote a lot of poems in order to get a sense of what I was trying to say in the larger nonfiction project and wanted to share one of these poems with you. And when you're a poet writing nonfiction, sometimes you take your stanzas and you turn them into paragraphs and you throw them in at the end of one of your chapters and hope your editor is okay with it. So while this is a poem on its own, but it also is an excerpt and a sort of adaptation from the end of one of my chapters. Growing up, the iconography of the Confederacy was an ever-present fixture of my daily life. Every day on the way to school, I passed a statue of P.G.T. Beauregard riding on horseback, his Confederate uniform slung over his shoulder, and his military cap pulled far down over his eyes. As a child, I did not know who P.G.T. Beauregard was. I did not know he was the man who ordered the first attack that opened the Civil War. I did not know he was one of the architects who designed the Confederate battle flag. I did not know he led an army predicated on maintaining the institution of slavery. What I knew is that he looked like so many of the other statues that ornamented the edges of this city, these copper garlands of a past that saw truth as something that should be buried underground and silenced by the soil. After the war, the sons and daughters of the Confederacy reshaped the contours of treason into something they could name as honorable. They call it the lost cause, and it crept its way into textbooks that attempted to cover up a crime that was still unfolding. They told us that Robert E. Lee was an honorable man, guilty of nothing but fighting for the state and the people that he loved, that the Southern flag was about heritage and remembering those slain fighting to preserve their way of life. But see, the thing about the lost cause is that it's only lost if you're not actually looking. The thing about heritage is that it's a word that also means I'm ignoring what we did to you. I was taught the Civil War wasn't about slavery, but I was never taught how the Declaration of Confederate Secession had the promise of human bondage carved into its stone. I was taught the war was about economics, but I was never taught that in 1860 the 4 million enslaved black people were worth more than every bank, factory, and railroad combined. I was taught the Civil War was about states' rights, but I was never taught how the Fugitive Slave Act could care less about a border and spell Georgia and Massachusetts the exact same way. It's easy to look at a flag and call it heritage when you don't see the black bodies buried behind it. It's easy to look at a statue and call it history when you ignore the laws written in its wake. I come from a city that is filled with statues of white men on pedestals and black children playing beneath them, where we played trumpets and trombones to drown out the Dixie song that still whistled in the wind. In New Orleans, There were over 100 roads, schools, and buildings named for Confederate soldiers and slaveholders. Every day, black children would walk into buildings named after people who never wanted them to be there. Every time I would return home, I would drive on streets named for those who wanted me in chains. Go straight for 2 miles on Robert E. Lee, take a left on Jefferson Davis, make the first right on Claiborne. In translation, go straight for 2 miles on the general who slaughtered hundreds of black soldiers who were trying to surrender, take a left on the president of the Confederacy who made the torture of black bodies the cornerstone of his new nation, make the first right on the man who mounted the heads of rebelling slaves on stakes and spread them across the city in order to prevent the others from getting any ideas. What name is there for this sort of violence? What do you call it when the road you walk on is named for those who imagined you under a noose? What do you call it when the roof over your head is named after people who would have wanted the bricks to crush you?